is that once the Prime Minister has been informed, or if the Prime Minister is informed about the death of Queen Elizabeth, then those flags will be lowered, perhaps even before the actual statement comes out. And so it's possible that they will be a sort of early warning about the condition of Queen Elizabeth if that news is to come through. In fact, there's a pool camera that has been trained specifically on those flags to catch the exact moment when they start to be lowered down to half staff. And so we're obviously keeping a close eye on that as well, Anderson.
Matthew, I'm going to check in with you shortly. I want to check in with our Richard Quest, who is joining us now actually from Singapore. Richard, obviously people all around the world are watching what is taking place at Balmoral, at 10 Downing Street, at Buckingham Palace, and it is just an example of the importance of the Queen on the world stage.
I was just thinking about this, Anderson. I was 60 years old this year, and the Queen has been a constant from the day I was born. She's always been there. Silver Jubilee when I was at school, the Golden Jubilee, the Diamond Jubilee. The Queen has just been the Queen. And if you're British, and that's just the way it has. We are in this position at the moment, Anderson, if you like, before any news and after any news, that whatever sort of confusion or uncertainty we have now, once we are given any news, a very rigorous timetable will come into play, including, as you've just been hearing, flags being lowered, if that's what it is. And Buckingham Palace, interestingly, the Queen is not in residence at Buckingham Palace. You were just showing the picture of the flag. There you are. Now, this goes back to Diana, remember, when the flag wasn't flown at half-mast after Diana, because it was the royal standard, and the royal standard never flies at half-mast. So on Buckingham Palace, because the Queen is at Balmoral, you have the Union Jack, the Union flag of the country. As I say, Anderson, we have a before and an after. We're in this process at the moment where we don't know. Once certainty has been given to us, one way or the other, then a certain rigorous timetable will start, and it will follow military precision right the way through.
There's many ways to look at this, and obviously, many ways to look at the Queen, but and you've just been talking about her as the monarch, as a constant presence in your life and in the lives of the vast majority of all British subjects in their lifetimes. There's also the personal and the family, and we are seeing the family gathering as many families do when the matriarch is ill and is at home and has chosen not to go, is not being sent to a hospital, is staying at home, and one can read into that whatever one might think. But that image which we are showing up on the screen right now, Richard, of where you see Prince William, where you see Prince, or you see Andrew, you see Prince Edward, his wife. It's extraordinary to see that. I'm wondering your thoughts on that image.
Look at that. Look at William's face. Look at William's face. The intensity of the look. Andrew's, the seriousness. Edward looking off, again, deep in thought, and Sophie sad. This is a family that is coming together in extremis, one way or the other. And we saw it with Philip, the way they all did their tributes afterwards about the life of Philip. But this is on a different scale. During the Queen Mother's when the Queen Mother passed, they worried whether people was going to come up and pay respects when she lay in state. There's no such worries when it comes to Her Majesty the Queen. In fact, the number one concern at the moment is, if the worst happens, will London fill up to the point of danger between whenever it happens and an eventual date of funeral? So those are the concerns: the practical, the emotional, the constitutional, and indeed the personal. And that is the embodiment of monarchy. I can't explain it in many cases to Americans, I can't explain it to anybody who hasn't been brought up in it, in a sense. But monarchy has all those components, and that is what we're witnessing tonight.
Well said. The royal family today rushing to Balmoral, as we've been talking about. We are waiting on word as to when Prince Harry will arrive at Balmoral. He was said to be already in Great Britain with his wife Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. We're told it is just Prince Harry who is heading toward Balmoral. That is the latest information we have. We don't know when he is expected to get there. We're going to have more on the breaking news, the health concerns about Queen Elizabeth after this quick break.
There are more people clicking than ever before, so we need greener ways to get to their door. With e-bikes, biofuels, innovations galore. We'll help you keep up with the clicks.
Back in the days, they used to do cedar weaving, to do tents, palm leaf weaving to cover roofs, and telly to decorate clothing. But nowadays, it's starting to fade. This is one of the special nice baskets. It's a very unique palm weaving. This technique is really very difficult. We create shoes, candles, coasters, packaging. The sky is the limit. It's our duty or our responsibility to keep it and pass it to next generations.
They have a monumental journey ahead of them, through wind and rain, from one continent to the next, although some have other ideas. Well, if you're going to fly, you may as well fly better.
Hey, Dad! Are we there yet?
More mortar strikes very, very close. They want us to start moving. This is the front line. Over 10,000 people detained just for being Tigrayan.
The panel of inquiry investigating Lekki Tollgate has admitted that a massacre did take place, corroborating CNN's investigation.
We have permission to film here, but local mining officials try to stop us.
What happens? The women are abused on the trip?
It's like a graveyard of American military hardware.
I've been informed by sources of threats against me. That's what happens here when you look too closely at Russia's business dealings.
You're a priest, you're a man of God. These children are accusing you of abusing them, and you have nothing to say for yourself?
We're CNN, journalists.
نعم الباغر CNN.
I'm Julia Chatterley. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
First Move with Julia Chatterley. Weekdays on CNN.
Regard, and that of course is part of her fascination, but at the same time I believe she's admired because she doesn't project drama. She projects continuity and solidity and integrity, and these are all qualities that in many leaders today on the world stage, we don't find sufficient abundance of. So there are qualities to her leadership style and her approach to managing family affairs, if I can go down to that personal level, that I think all Americans and citizens around the world can learn from and take lessons from.
John Quelch, lovely words there about the Queen. John Quelch, who was awarded CBE by the Queen back in 2011. Thank you very much for joining us here on Sky News this evening.
Good evening. This is Sky News live from Buckingham Palace. Senior royals have gathered at Balmoral after confirmation that the Queen is under medical supervision because her doctors have become concerned about her health. All of the Queen's children are thought to now be at her side in Balmoral. Prince Charles was seen leaving Dumfries House in Ayrshire to travel to Aberdeenshire. And a bit later on, a plane landed at Aberdeen Airport carrying members of the royal family. That included Prince William and Prince Andrew. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended that she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. The Prime Minister then tweeted that the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. She continued, "My thoughts and the thoughts of people across our United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time." The Archbishop of Canterbury tweeted, "My prayers and the prayers of the people across the Church of England and the nation are with Her Majesty the Queen today." It continues, "May God's presence strengthen and comfort Her Majesty, her family, and those who are caring for her at Balmoral." Let's bring in our royal correspondent now, Rhiannon Mills. And Rhiannon, do we understand now that all the senior members of the royal family are now at Balmoral?
So it seems that the only person who may well be missing at the moment from Balmoral is Prince Harry, who purely by luck is in this country this week carrying out a series of engagements. So we are still waiting to find out when he is going to arrive. But yes, we saw other members of the royal family arriving in the last couple of hours after having to fly all the way up from here, all the way up to Aberdeenshire. We know that Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall were already in the area. They were already staying at Birk Hall and also due to carry out some engagements in Scotland, both today and tomorrow. So they got there very quickly. Also, Princess Anne, she was also in the area because she'd carried out engagements. But then this afternoon we saw the cars carrying Prince William, the Earl and Countess of Wessex, so Prince Edward and Sophie, and also Prince Andrew, because we heard actually quite early on today that members of the royal family had been informed that doctors had decided that the Queen should remain under medical supervision because they were concerned about her health. And the palace, I think, surprising that they should give us that information in itself, but also further surprise, the fact that they decided to announce that members of the family would be gathering up in Balmoral. Of course, the palace, not an institution that likes to cause unnecessary worry, concern or attention. But of course, the fact that we have this statement saying that the doctors have been concerned about her and now her family are gathering is inevitably going to cause worry, and also I think a degree of shock for many of us. You were just seeing pictures there of Tuesday where the Queen very clearly had told her advisors that she wanted to be the one who again carried out the appointment of yet another Prime Minister. Yes, arrangements had to be changed to allow that to happen, but she was still very much front and centre carrying out those constitutional duties. The pictures that we're seeing at the moment actually a year ago, and it does show you just how much things have changed for the Queen. Over the last 12 months, we have seen her carrying out fewer duties, fewer responsibilities, and we have regularly been told by the palace that she was having those episodic mobility issues. But also, I think the palace and the mechanisms that the team around her wanting to make sure that at all times they could adjust the plans and make sure they could facilitate things as much as possible to allow her to continue to carry out her duties. Undoubtedly, this is going to come as a worry to many across the country. But I think for the Queen, certainly her carrying out her duties on Tuesday was once again a sign that that pledge she made when she was just 21 and reinforced this year to mark her Platinum Jubilee, she was and continues to be determined to carry out her duties. And her family, of course, now there to support her in Balmoral.
And of course, Rhiannon, Her Majesty's been at Balmoral all summer, as she has been every summer.
That's right. It's a place that she loves, and you can see why when you travel up to that very secluded part of the Highlands. I went for a look around Balmoral earlier in the summer, and there's a wildness to it. And for a family who we know, they love their country pursuits, we know that the Queen is never happier than when she's surrounded by her dogs and also her horses as well. And over the years, many people have talked about how they may well catch a glimpse of the Queen out on her ponies as she's been spending time in Balmoral. But it's also a really important family time for her. And actually in the past, I've spoken to the likes of Prince Edward and Prince William about those family times, because you can't forget, for the Queen, 70 years of remarkable public service. 365 days of the year, always looking at those red boxes full of state papers, but also trying to balance family life. And Balmoral is a place where I think to a degree she felt she could do that. And for all of those family members who we can see there in that car, I think now they will be at Balmoral, where, of course, they've had so many wonderful memories that they have shared with the Queen, but also no doubt catching up with the doctors, trying to get the updates of exactly how she's doing, how she's feeling as we await updates from Buckingham Palace.
And just on the doctors, presumably she has had constant medical attention over the past few years.
Well, I think what's been so interesting about the Queen, and why probably the last 12 months have been a surprise to many as we've seen her, in a way, handing over some of those responsibilities, is throughout her life she has really enjoyed relatively good health, and we've had the odd cataract operation, or she's had the odd issue potentially with walking. About 6 years ago she was seen with a walking stick, but that soon went. And I was always struck by the fact that well into her 90s she's continued to carry out things that many people in their 80s wouldn't be able to do. For example, walking that long length of Westminster Abbey, or walking up those steep steps at St Paul's, completely unaided, completely unassisted. And so for some people, it has been a shock that she has had to hand over some of those responsibilities, has had to at times say, well, I can't do that. I just can't do that today. But she is 96 years old. But I think what we saw on Tuesday was that resolve to do what she can. And her family, increasingly, over the last 12 months, have been there standing by. Of course, we saw it on the Platinum Jubilee weekend. They were all there around her. On the Thursday, she was there on the balcony. She was lighting the first beacon. But then it did take it out of her. She had to relax for a couple of days, rest up for a couple of days. And that was where the family stepped in. But also, I think what's been striking over the last 12 months is the Queen has been showing us that she has got great faith in the future, surrounded by the likes of Prince William and Kate, Prince Charles and Camilla, saying, look, I have real faith in the future, and you should too.
Rhiannon, thank you very much.
Well, crowds have been gathering at Buckingham Palace this evening. News broke at around 12:30 this afternoon. That statement coming from Buckingham Palace about the Queen's health, saying that her doctors were concerned for Her Majesty's health and recommended that she remain under medical supervision, adding that the Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. The Queen may not be at Buckingham Palace, but it is very much a focus for those well-wishers who want to head there and send their best wishes to the Queen. We've had no update officially since that statement. We were informed, though, that the Queen's close family were told, and they have since been making their way to Balmoral. Within the last hour or so, we've seen Princes William, Edward and Andrew arrive. Prince William driving Prince Edward and his wife Sophie Wessex and Prince Andrew from Aberdeen Airport to Balmoral to see the Queen. Prince Charles was in Ayrshire, we understand. He took a helicopter to Aberdeenshire, to the Balmoral estate earlier on in the day before that statement came out. And as we understand it, we are now waiting for the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, to arrive at Balmoral. We understand he is making his way there. He is yet to arrive. Well, let's head to Balmoral and our Scotland correspondent, James Matthews. James, despite the weather, which pretty much sums up the mood this afternoon, crowds are gathering at Buckingham Palace. What's happening there at the Balmoral estate?
Yeah, well, crowds-wise, not a lot, actually. Yes, it's the tourist season, but on this filthy day in terms of the weather, there's something like a couple of dozen tourists around. Many media here, of course, to see comings and goings at the gates of the Balmoral estate. And we saw the arrival within the past hour of a four-vehicle convoy. Leading that convoy was Prince William at the wheel of a vehicle that had the Duke of York, his uncle, in the passenger seat, and in the rear seats were Edward and Sophie. I think it's fair to say all were grim-faced as they entered the gates to widen the family gathering around the Queen. Prince Charles, as you said, Sarah Jane, was already inside. He has been inside Balmoral for some hours today. He was due at a royal event in the Central Belt, and that's the first inkling that anybody had that things were not as they should be today when that particular event had to be cancelled. He has substituted, of course, for his mother over recent weeks. Last Saturday it was the Braemar gathering. She would normally attend that. It's one of the events here that is a big draw for the royal family. The Queen particularly enjoys the children's sack race. It's an event that she would typically attend, but not this year. Prince Charles attended the Braemar Highland Games. He also spent some time with his mother on Saturday, several hours, I'm told, and he has been here for a few weeks, as has she. I mean, she's here for a couple of months every year at this time of year. It is the base of her summer holiday, and those around her make the point that in terms of where she will continuously sleep in the one place, this is it, Balmoral. She spends 3 months in the one place, in the one bed, and it's a place, of course, that she's very fond of. She has changed her routine in accordance with her declining health. Normally she would attend Crathie Kirk every Sunday. COVID, of course, changed that in the initial months, but ever since COVID, she's not attended church. Charles has gone to the nearby Crathie Kirk, but for the Queen, the minister has crossed and worship has taken place within Balmoral Castle itself. In the months of COVID, it took place inside one of the large rooms inside that property, with some distance between the Queen and the visiting minister. She has looked relatively well. People who have seen her in recent weeks lunching with her lady-in-waiting at Inchnabobbert Cottage at Glenmick, picnicking at her mother's old fishing hut by the River Dee. They say that when they've seen her out and about, she's looked fine and relatively healthy, healthier, I'm told, than she did in the past couple of months over the course of the Platinum Jubilee and so on. She's been walking the corgis, walking with a stick and without. And of course, we saw her on Tuesday, the last time we saw her publicly, when she appointed Liz Truss as Prime Minister. The people who were in that room before the Prime Minister arrived, the press secretary and press photographer, they speak about her joking about the dark skies over Balmoral, dark skies that she has become well used to in a place where she has that she has enjoyed, despite the regular inclement weather. But it's, you know, it's a dark day here, weather-wise. There is concern, clearly, not just among the royal physicians, but the family as well. I was here 25 years ago, almost to the day, Sarah Jane, when there was another very dark day when Princess Diana died. I remember Prince William, Prince Harry as young children walking up this particular road, taking a look at floral tributes. They will be reunited behind the gates of the Balmoral estate in the next few hours, assuming that's when Prince Harry arrives here, probably via Aberdeen Airport. So a family gathering. They're used to family gatherings here in good times and in bad.
Yeah, that's a sobering reminder, James, of what we are watching unfold. As James Matthews has been saying, the majority of senior royals are behind those gates at Balmoral with the Queen. We are just waiting for Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, who we understand is making his way at Balmoral to be with his family. The world is watching and waiting for an update on the Queen's health, but important to remember that this time that it is a family that is dealing with the ill health of a mother and a grandmother, 96 years of age.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Well, here at Buckingham Palace, yes, indeed, we're watching and waiting. The world is watching and waiting because although Her Majesty the Queen and the members of the royal family are at Balmoral, it's here where you get the information from 6 hours or so ago when that statement was released about the concerns about the Queen's health, the medical supervision that she is now under. Well, as we wait, I'm joined now by Dick Griffin, one of the Queen's former Royal Protection officers. Good to talk to you, Dick.
Hi, Dermot.
You spent many, many years here. Just how long in total did you work in Royal Protection with the royal family?
Oh, gosh, I was there like man and boy, 32 years.
Was that all in the Queen's service? Or
no, I came in initially on the uniform side after the Michael Fagan break-in. And after a year, I was transferred to, as he was, Prince Edward, to take to Cambridge University for 3 years. And then I was promoted and spent 13.5 years looking after the Duke of Edinburgh. And then 1999, I was promoted and moved to Her Majesty the Queen for 14 years until I retired in 2013.
My goodness me.
So 30 years with them.
And you must have been reluctant to retire. Just tell me your thoughts at this time after that statement. It was a real jolt for everyone.
Oh, I mean, it was devastation. I mean, I was lucky enough to be so close to them. And I was probably as close to them as some of my own family. So to hear such sad news, you know, while we pray to God it'll turn out good news, you know, it's not looking good, so I'm prepared for the worst.
Indeed. Tell us about Her Majesty. I mean, you were in a privileged, a lucky position, as you say. What a wonderful job to have. Talk to me about the relationship you built up with her.
Well, you're lucky enough to, the protection officers who work there, like all the personal staff, you do build up a very special relationship with her. And after all, you're always conscious of the fact that she's the Queen and you work for her, so you never step over the line. But she's so considerate. She wants to know all about your family, everything you do in your off-duty time, anything you've got. And we talk about, sometimes you're in the car for hours and hours, and occasionally at Balmoral you go out on a picnic with her, and sometimes just the two of you. And you just talk about everything under the sun, and it was just wonderful, wonderful times.
No sense then of boss and employer, and much, much more than that.
Well,
Head
no.
of state, your Queen and subject.
It was clearly Your Majesty and Mum. But somebody asked me this afternoon, I was giving a talk to a U3A group about my life with the Queen, and somebody asked me, has the Queen ever shouted at me? I said, yeah, several times. And 9 times out of 10, and there was a good reason for it, and we got over it and we moved on. But no, I was just so lucky to spend that time with her.
And what about Balmoral? You say spending, many happy months up there over the years during those long summers, the barbecues,
Well, Balmoral was... I was so lucky because probably I retired in 2013. And 2008, I was planning to retire and had a job lined up and everything. and went and spoke to the Queen in private and told her I was thinking of retiring in 6 months' time. And she promptly took me out into the hills and had a picnic and set me down in the blanket and spent an hour persuading me not to retire and to stay on for another 5 years and be the policeman for a Diamond Jubilee year, a Platinum Jubilee year. And, you know, so I had to ring my wife up and say, guess what, dear? I'm not retiring, I'm staying on for another 5 years.
And being the Queen, she had the power to do that. I mean, were there any rules within the Met at the time that you had to retire at a certain age?
Well, strange enough, there used to be. As Chief Inspector, you had to retire at the age 56 or 57. They changed it slightly, and for me carrying on, I mean, I carried on until I was 62, which is probably a bit long in the tooth. That's why I thought in 2013 I'd better retire, otherwise the Queen will have a 70-year-old protection officer.
Got to ask you about those sticky moments. I mean, you mentioned one of the most memorable, the most difficult, when the barriers were breached, so to speak, at Buckingham Palace. Not just that, Michael Fagan ended up in Her Majesty the Queen's bedroom. What was this, 1981?
82. Yeah, I was part of the team that came in as a result of Michael Fagan, and it was a catalogue of errors. The alarms around Buckingham Palace were completely out of date. They'd go off 30, 40 times a night, so the police had to switch them off and rely on the army and the police to deter intruders. As it happened, Fagan found a blind spot, climbed over the wall, climbed up a drain pipe, got into the stamp room, which gave him access into Buckingham Palace. And, of course, 3 in the morning, the staff were all asleep, there's no one around. And all he was after was alcohol, cigarettes, food. And of course, and he did it twice. That was the amazing part. When he was interviewed, he said, this is the second time I've broken in. And of course, on the second time, he found his way. He didn't realise, I mean, there's not a sign on the Queen's bedroom door, the Queen sleeps here. It was sheer chance. And in he goes, sits on the Queen's bed. Now, you can imagine if it happened to you and I, we'd wake up alarmed. And the Queen woke up, who are you? And she initially thought it was a member of staff. And quickly got dispelled by that. And fortunately, he said, well, who are you? And then, what do you want? And then he said, well, I want somebody to eat, want somebody to drink. And the Queen was able to call the police. Fortunately, a footman, Paul Wybrew, arrived on the scene and took him out.
I mean, worrying as that incident was, it's a real insight into Her Majesty's character, isn't it? Just how calm she stayed. There she is, alone with a stranger in her bedroom, and she kept calm and she talked him down.
She did. She talked him down, and she had the presence to get on the phone, ring the... I mean, she initially rang her footman, but she couldn't get through to him, so she rang the palace switchboard. Can you get a police officer sent to my room? Kept calm. And in fact, it was so calm that the switchboard operator didn't realise, she thought it was routine. Rang the sergeant in the control room, who said to one of his policemen, can you go up to the Queen's apartment and see what she wants? And no urgency, smarten yourself up before you go, and that's why it probably took him 15 minutes to get there.
Well, Dick, thank you very much indeed. I know you're going to stay with us during the course of the evening, so we'll chat more later.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well, in the past few minutes, President Biden's press secretary has given her reaction to news of the Queen's condition.
The president has been briefed and will be updated throughout the day on the concerning news out of the United Kingdom about Queen Elizabeth's health. His and the First Lady's thoughts are with the Queen and her family today. The president also conveyed to Prime Minister Truss during a previously scheduled video conference this morning that he and Dr. Biden are thinking of the Queen, her family, and the people of the United Kingdom.
So that's President Biden conveying his thoughts and prayers to the Prime Minister Liz Truss in the wake of this news about the Queen and concerns over her health. Just to update you, if you're just joining us, Palace spokesman released a statement earlier today saying, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. As a result of that statement, the Queen's close family have been gathering at Balmoral. We have been monitoring the comings and goings, and as far as we are aware, it is just the Duke of Sussex still to arrive. However, he may have arrived unbeknownst to cameras, but that is the situation we understand at the moment. Well, the Prime Minister was notified in the House of Commons of the news. This was as she was briefing MPs about her cost of living rescue plan. Then the Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, gave a statement.
I know I speak on behalf of the entire House when I say that we send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers at this moment.
Hoyle addressing the House after the Prime Minister and the Labour leader were informed of the development from Buckingham Palace. It was quite the dramatic moment in the House of Commons, effectively politics being suspended for the day. Let's go live to Downing Street. Our political correspondent Joe Pike has been following events. Joe.
The moment, Sarah Jane, when the atmosphere changed in the House of Commons chamber. The first sign of that was Nadhim Zahawi, a Cabinet Office Minister, passing a note to the PM, also speaking to Lindsay Hoyle. Keir Starmer, the opposition leader, also spoken to. By the body language and by their facial expressions, we knew something concerning was clearly happening. And then, of course, we had the statement from Buckingham Palace and Lindsay Hoyle's response. No response clip on camera from either of the main party leaders. Liz Truss remains working here at Downing Street, her spokesperson saying she has no plans to travel to Scotland. But Liz Truss has put out a message of concern, I think, on Twitter. She has said this: the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. My thoughts and the thoughts of people across our United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time. Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, tweeted, "Along with the rest of the country, I am deeply worried by the news from Buckingham Palace this afternoon. My thoughts are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time, and I join everyone across the United Kingdom in hoping for her recovery." I think it's worth pointing out that party leaders like Keir Starmer and now Liz Truss will have sensed in the last year a changing in how the Queen does carry out her central constitutional role as head of state. We saw a change in how the state opening Parliament happened, with the Queen not present, not reading her own speech, but her son, the Prince of Wales, doing that. We also, of course, Sarah Jane, saw a change this week with the handover of power. One outgoing Prime Minister tendering his resignation, the incoming Prime Minister Liz Truss being asked to form a government. They did not travel 1 mile from here, from Downing Street to Buckingham Palace. Instead, 500 miles they travelled to Balmoral, to that private, secluded castle, which has been a home for monarchs back to the time of Queen Victoria in the 1850s. Certainly, there was also a sign last night when the Privy Council meeting that the Queen was supposed to be leading and chairing was postponed. That would have been happening virtually using video conferencing software. The Privy Council being a group of senior government advisors, but that did not happen. Now, there's no big constitutional problem because that is a delay, but it was perhaps another sign. I think it's also important to reflect the very important role the Queen clearly has provided and continues to provide to Prime Ministers, providing wisdom and counsel, which is valuable partly because of her longevity, because she has spoken to known Prime Ministers through significant times of change, significant times of crisis, and many of those figures, if we talk of Winston Churchill or Anthony Eden or Harold Macmillan, many of those people who've long since left this earth are now figures in history books, people whose decisions historians, school children, university students debate over. It is a sign of her longevity that she's been providing that role for 7 decades, that she is in her 10th decade. I spoke to one cabinet minister in the last few minutes who said it's important to stress the government don't know anything. Buckingham Palace are in charge. They will remain in charge. And this cabinet minister certainly said that the government will know as soon as the rest of us do, as soon as any update comes from Buckingham Palace. If you talk to politicians who've met the Queen and have some sense of her, what they speak of is warmth, a familiar face, but also, Sarah Jane, I think it's important to stress, she remains a bit of an enigmatic figure, and the fact that she is now surrounded by her family in her private residence, where she has relaxed with family over decades, feeds into that picture of the Queen.
We have some very important news. Buckingham Palace has just announced that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has died. She was 96 years old. The Queen died just a few moments ago, the announcements at Balmoral. She was the longest reigning monarch in British history and the world's oldest head of state. Her eldest son and heir, Charles, the former Prince of Wales, is now the King. Now, if you're joining us, this was the news in the last few moments. Buckingham Palace has announced that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has died. Our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, joins me now. Rhiannon, your thoughts?
So it has just been confirmed via social media, their website, in which the royal family have said the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. They add the King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. This will clearly come as devastating news for the royal family and millions of people across the United Kingdom and around the world. Queen Elizabeth II was a much-loved and respected monarch and a truly unique figure on the world stage, a head of state without equal, admired not just here in the United Kingdom, but across the globe by members of the public, politicians and religious leaders. Many of us will simply not remember a time when she wasn't our head of state, and she was a constant figure in every aspect of national life. From becoming queen when she was only 25, she then went on to become Britain's longest reigning monarch and displayed this unwavering commitment to her country and her Commonwealth throughout what was a truly record-breaking reign. Now, her dedication to that constitutional role was never questioned, but her family were just as important to her as a devoted wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. And their admiration for her was always so clearly seen when she was surrounded by her family, when we saw those moments of
Good morning. We have breaking news from Scotland here at Balmoral, where Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has passed away at the age of 96. The news came through just a few minutes ago. It was released on the royal family's Twitter account. The statement reads, "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow." Her family had gathered around her in the last couple of hours as doctors became concerned about the Queen's health. Her Majesty had seemed quite well earlier in the week, welcoming both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss here to her Scottish hideaway. But in the last couple of hours, Her Majesty's reign of 70 years has come to an end. Frail, in front of a fire at her treasured holiday home in Balmoral, Scotland, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, aged 96, standing to duty to meet the new UK Prime Minister, the 15th in her reign. We now know just how unwell she was, but her nation, the Commonwealth, always came first for the longest-serving British monarch. She celebrated 70 years on the throne, her Platinum Jubilee. While her lost mobility meant she didn't take to the streets or Horse Guards parade, she was on the balcony, her great-grandchildren by her side, for a wave to the people for her last milestone hurrah. For the princess, who never expected to become queen. Born in London's Mayfair in 1926, Princess Elizabeth was the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York. Educated by a governess at home, Lilibet, as she was known to her loved ones, lived a privileged and carefree childhood. But young Elizabeth's life and legacy were to change almost overnight when her uncle, King Edward VIII, abdicated to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee.
This decision has been made less difficult to me by the sure knowledge that my brother will be able to take my place forthwith.
Edward's divisive decision turned his brother's world on its head.
Everything changed for the Queen from the moment that her uncle Edward abdicated. It changed everything. It changed her future life. It changed her father's life. A lot of people say it shortened her father's life as well.
The coronation of the new King George took place in 1937, and from that day on, Elizabeth became a queen in training.
I remember my father making me write down what I remembered about his coronation. It was very valuable.
Just 2 years later, a young naval officer was tasked with entertaining Elizabeth and her sister at a military event. It was then, as legend goes, that the 13-year-old princess fell for Philip over a game of croquet. In 1939, Britain went to war. A teenage Elizabeth and her younger sister Margaret were moved to the safety of Windsor Castle, while her parents remained at Buckingham Palace. Aged 14, Elizabeth, the heir, made her first public speech addressing thousands of evacuated children on BBC Radio, the first of many public orations.
Her Royal Highness, Princess Elizabeth.
I want, on behalf of all the children at home, to send you our love and best wishes to you and to your kind hosts as well.
By 1944, aged 18, Elizabeth had joined the women's branch of the Territorial Army and began her training as a mechanic soon after. Her new role earned her the nickname Princess Auto Mechanic in the British press. When the war eventually ended, Elizabeth and Margaret slipped into the crowds unnoticed to join the celebrations, an anecdote that was turned into a blockbuster film many years later.
We're going out incognito. The most extraordinary night of my life.
2 years after victory brought peace to Britain's shores, Elizabeth celebrated her 21st birthday. In another national address, she pledged to dedicate her life to the service of the Commonwealth.
My whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family, to which we all belong.
Her coming of age complete when Elizabeth accepted the hand of an exiled Greek and Danish prince, the handsome sailor proposing more than a decade after the pair first met.
Soon the nation rejoiced at the announcement of Princess Elizabeth's engagement.
I think a lot of people find it hard to believe that she never had another love. He was the man for her.
Philip renounced his right to both European thrones in order to wed, and the Commonwealth celebrated the marriage of Princess Elizabeth. In challenging economic times, the wedding could not be seen as extravagant. Even the heir to the throne exchanged ration coupons for material for her wedding dress.
Before long, the calls of the people were answered, as onto the famous balcony came the bride and bridegroom.
After marrying, the young couple moved to Malta, where Prince Philip was stationed with the Navy.
At the Villa Guardiamanja, the princess joined the Duke.
2 blissful years of relative normality. Elizabeth described them as among the happiest of her life. Beaches and boat trips, dinners and dances.
The guests of honour, the Princess and the Duke.
Soon their family grew. Prince Charles, born in 1948, and Princess Anne in 1950. The Queen was abroad when news reached her of her father's sudden death from lung cancer.
The tragic news reached Princess Elizabeth and her husband while in Kenya.
The grief and gravity of that moment reimagined in the series The Crown.
This new Elizabethan age comes at a time when mankind stands uncertainly poised.
Wait.
On the edge of catastrophe.
The 27-year-old began her transition from mother to monarch.
Is Your Majesty willing to take the oath?
I am willing.
The coronation was watched by 20 million people around the world, the biggest television event of the time. Just months later, the new Queen became the first and only reigning monarch to visit Australia.
Riding at anchor, royal as a swan, is the Queen we have never seen.
Welcomed by around 1 million onlookers as she sailed into Sydney Harbour on the royal barge.
I want to tell you all how happy I am to be amongst you and how much I look forward to my journey through Australia.
The Queen and Philip traversed the country from Townsville to Tasmania, 57 towns and cities in 58 days. Her Majesty would return to Australia a further 15 times, building a close bond with a far-off nation. A decade after the birth of Princess Anne, Prince Andrew arrived, and 4 years later, Prince Edward.
Well, I think the Queen herself would have admitted that, she was a very different mother to her first 2 children and her later 2 children. She had more confidence and more time when she was dealing with Andrew and Edward.
A house full of Windsors, 4 children, and of course, the family's 4-legged friends. The Queen was a lifelong devotee to her dogs. Her first corgi, Dookie, a gift from her father when she was a child. It's estimated she owned over 30 dogs in her lifetime, a lifelong passion for horses too. When a young man fired blanks at the royals during the annual trooping of the colour parade, Her Majesty's mastery in the saddle was unmistakable.
Duke of Edinburgh, Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. Hello, some little disturbance. Burmese receiving a reassuring pat from Her Majesty the Queen.
And she's a marvellous rider, so got a marvellous way with horses. Made of strong stuff,
That stern poker face only occasionally slipped while watching her own horses crossing the finish line first.
Her Majesty the Queen only presents 2 trophies during Royal Ascot, and look at the delight there, the sheer joy.
1992 was not so joyful. The royals were rocked by a terrible 12 months.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure.
Newspaper scandals and the shock divorce proceedings of 3 of her children caused great public embarrassment for Her Majesty. A devastating fire at Windsor Castle destroyed more than 100 rooms.
In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
Her popularity dipped further as the world mourned Princess Diana in 1997.
She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness.
It is a time in the 1990s when most people will acknowledge that the Queen did put a foot wrong, and she did suffer. I think the royal family collectively suffered a public image crisis, and it took a number of years for that to mend.
But with her stoic sensibility, Queen Elizabeth weathered the storm.
Today is another landmark.
Year upon year, the Queen's traditional Christmas Day message summarised the heartaches and the happenings of the past 12 months.
I hope that 1958 may bring you God's blessing
and hopes for the coming year.
Christmas will bring back sad memories. It is true that the world has had to confront moments of darkness this year.
Christmas at Sandringham would have been a full house in recent years, with 8 grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren. In recent times, Queen Elizabeth handed over extra responsibilities to the younger generations, who in turn brought some fun to the firm.
Remember when you told us to bring it at the Invictus Games?
Careful what you wish for. Boom.
Oh, really? Please.
Boom.
But she knew how to have her own fun too, a rare cameo appearance livening up the 2012 Olympic opening ceremony.
Good evening, Swan.
After her husband retired, Her Majesty still refused to hang up her hat. Front and centre stage was where Queen Elizabeth II spent much of her life. Here in June 2021, surrounded by world leaders at the G7 summit.
Are you supposed to be looking as if you're enjoying it?
Yes.
Her wit and wisdom as sharp as ever at the age of 95. A lifetime dedicated to service. Elizabeth had links to more than 600 charities and organisations. She visited more than 100 countries during her reign and was served by more than 170 Prime Ministers across the Commonwealth, including 15 British Prime Ministers and 16 Australian.
Well, I think the Queen's record can be summed up with that one word, and that word is duty. She has always put her duty as the Queen ahead of every other consideration.
Even the pandemic didn't halt public engagements.
She leapt on video calling. She knew that this would be another way to be seen, to be believed, which was one of her mantras throughout her whole reign.
And in the darkness of Britain's lockdowns, she became the guiding voice of a nation.
We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
Urging Britons to stay strong through the restrictions. Her own lockdown tragedy came when her beloved husband Philip passed away at the age of 99. COVID restrictions meant the funeral was a moving, yet muted affair. In the months that followed,
I'm here.
Business as usual, but showing her age. A cane appearing in public, a trip cancelled on doctor's orders, and a rare overnight hospital stay, forcing Her Majesty to slow down and signalling a monarch nearing the end of her reign. For almost 7 decades, she bore the weight of the crown. Now, Queen Elizabeth's reign draws to a close, but a remarkable royal legacy will live on.
Good morning. If you're just joining us, this is Hugh Whitfield at Balmoral Castle in Scotland, where the news has been at Buckingham Palace that the Queen has died peacefully this afternoon here at Balmoral. The statement from Buckingham Palace confirmed that the King and the Queen Consort will remain here at Balmoral this evening UK time and will return to London tomorrow. Just a few short hours ago, he was Prince Charles arriving here at Balmoral Castle, but now he's King Charles III. He arrived this morning after travelling over with Camilla, the Queen Consort, to be by his mother's bedside. And throughout the day, other members of the royal family have gathered here as well, including Prince Andrew, Prince Edward, his wife Sophie, Prince William and Prince Harry, who's been here in the UK with his wife Meghan. Meghan did not make the journey up, neither did the Duchess of Cambridge. Down in London right now, these are live pictures from Buckingham Palace, where the formal death notice has been placed in public view. The crowds have been steady throughout the day, but have certainly grown in the last 20 minutes since the announcement was made. And I can tell you, in Edinburgh, at the Palace of Holyrood House, there has been a death notice placed there, announcing the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and confirming that Charles is king. We'll have special coverage beginning very shortly at 4:30 on the East Coast for Sunrise, a special edition of Sunrise this morning. But between now and then, we will join our UK broadcast partners at ITV News.
Become king this afternoon, but Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge, is now the Duke of Cornwall and Cambridge. He's not yet the Prince of Wales, which is the traditional title given to the heir to the throne. That will come in due course.
Is that inevitable? Will he?
Yes, that's inevitable. Every king was previously the Prince of Wales. That was the case for even King Edward VIII and all those who came before him. But right now, Prince William and Kate are the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall and Cambridge, because they have inherited the Dukedom of Cornwall, which was created to provide an income and an estate for the heir to the throne, which is what Prince William now is. His father is king, Camilla is Queen Consort. And that is a significant set of changes.
Yes, it is. But in the fact that she has become Queen Consort, that in itself was unthinkable even a few years ago. But the Queen made sure that that was going to be in place.
The Queen put all these things in place in the last few months. In fact, the announcement about Camilla being the Queen Consort was made by the Queen herself on Accession Day on February the 6th, the day that she marks the passing of her own father, and still did, even though it was 70 years before. And this year, on Accession Day, when officially marked her Platinum Jubilee, she said that when the time comes, and that time has now come, she would like her son's wife to be known as the Queen Consort. So we now have King Charles, we wait for confirmation, and Queen Camilla, who is not a Queen Regnant, but she is a Queen Consort. And
explain the difference, if you would.
She's not a queen by birth, she is a queen by marriage, in the same way that Prince Philip was a consort to Queen Elizabeth II. Camilla is now Queen Consort to King Charles, if that's the name he decides to take. In the same way that Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, people will remember, was the consort to King George VI. That is the position that we now have following the passing of Her Majesty the Queen this afternoon.
It is a fascinating. I mean, it is a very sad day, and I think many people in this country and around the world will be deeply saddened by what's happened today. But it is also an enormous event in terms of our country, in terms of the changes that will now happen, and perhaps even in terms of the way that we're seen internationally, because she was such an international figure, wasn't she?
You're right. This is a moment of significant change for the nation. It's a significant change on the world stage, and I think actually of the images that we saw of the Queen at the G7 summit that was held in Cornwall very recently, when she was the focal point. There were presidents and prime ministers from the biggest economies of the world, and yet she was the focus. She was the one that everyone looked up to and respected, and tributes will be coming in around the world far and wide. In fact, they were coming in this afternoon, and you can see there in Downing Street the The lectern has been placed, a lectern that was only put up 2 days ago after Liz Truss went to see the Queen to be appointed her 15th Prime Minister. That lectern is now up for entirely different reasons, not to mark the start of Liz Truss's premiership, but to mark the end of the Queen's reign as Queen Elizabeth II after 70 years.
And as you say, that was only a couple of days ago that Liz Truss was making her debut speech as Prime Minister. So that, what I think will become a very famous photograph of Liz Truss being received by the Queen at Balmoral, will have been the final photograph of Queen Elizabeth II.
Yes, you're right. And actually, I was struck, and I think, let's see if we can find that photograph of the Queen in the drawing room at Balmoral Castle now, because I was struck even yesterday, before we knew about any decline in the Queen's health over the last 2 days. Let's think, we're talking about 2 days here since Liz Truss and met the Prime Minister and Boris Johnson resigned. I mean, these are 2 days, and in that time, this was the Queen's final duty. One was to ask Liz Truss to form an administration. The other was to issue just yesterday, to issue a statement expressing her condolences to the people of Canada for the attacks in Saskatchewan. So, I mean, people will talk about how this Queen worked, did her duty right to the very end, right until 2 days before her death. This was happening at Balmoral Castle.
It is remarkable, and when you think of the changes that she's seen, as we've already said, Winston Churchill, her first Prime Minister, Liz Truss, her last, she's probably appeared more on camera than anyone else in the world during that time. The modern monarchy that she came to exemplify, you know, she even had a Twitter account, didn't she?
Yes, and actually, you mentioned Prime Ministers. We go Churchill, Eden, Macmillan, I might miss a few here, Sir Alec Douglas-Home, Harold Wilson, Edward Heath, James Callaghan, Margaret Thatcher, I mean, John Major. I mean, there's so many changes that this Queen saw. They were all Prime Ministers who served her because it's her government, and the Prime Ministers who valued her counsel. The weekly audience they had with this elderly and international stateswoman was something that each one of those 15 Prime Ministers welcomed, and the most recent audience was with Liz Truss, her 15th Prime Minister. Yes, it is remarkable, isn't it? We were looking at the aerial view of Buckingham Palace just a few moments ago with the Royal Footman putting out the statement on the railings of Buckingham Palace, as is traditional, as you so rightly say, Chris, of any significant news. And there it is, the statement announcing the death of Queen Elizabeth II. And it reads as follows: "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow." So that on the railings of Buckingham Palace as we speak, and many, many people starting to gather there. And there was that rather wonderful picture of a rainbow over Windsor Castle a little bit earlier this evening, and we're told there was a double rainbow over Buckingham Palace just a few minutes ago as those clouds parted just after the news was released by the royal household. I think we'll see pictures of that, all in due course, Chris. But the new monarch, the King, and the Queen Consort then return to London tomorrow. Yes, I think the late announcement from Buckingham Palace this afternoon of the Queen's passing means that a lot of the events that might have otherwise happened today will now move into tomorrow. And there is an 11 or 12 day period now in which a sequence of events will fall into place. It will involve the Queen remaining in Scotland, possibly for 4 or 5 days before the coffin is brought down to London. There is also a lying in state, which ordinarily happens at the Palace of Westminster, in the Great Hall of the Palace of Westminster. And Mary, you might remember that when the Queen Mother died, there was an enormously long queue of people waiting to file past that coffin. Yeah. I mean, a couple of flowers already turning up at Windsor for an announcement that was made, just minutes ago. So I think this is a moment that the country will pause and reflect, but it will take a very long time, I think, for it to sink in that the Queen, this constant figure for 7 decades, is no longer with us.
Yes, it is an extraordinary thought, isn't it? And we're told that crowds broke out into the national anthem outside Buckingham Palace, and many of them were weeping as the flag was lowered to half-mast. That's the Union flag, isn't it? Not the Royal Standard, because that would have been at Balmoral, I'm guessing.
The Royal Standard can never fly at half-mast because there is always a monarch, and the very moment that the Queen passed, then Prince Charles became king, and it will be his standard, the Royal Standard in Scotland, as I believe, which will now fly above Balmoral Castle, where he, the King, is in residence. At all other royal residences, as we just saw at Buckingham Palace, as we saw at Windsor Castle a short while ago, the Union flag will fly at half-mast. And you're looking here at pictures of the state opening of Parliament, which the Prince, as he was, the King as he now is, had to do on behalf of his mother recently. Well, now, of course, the state opening of Parliament, when it happens next, will be opened by the King and the Queen consort. And as I just said, I think it will take a very long time for this kind of news, for the changes that we are seeing to sink in. The stamps, the money and all that might change in due course, but this is a significant moment in the life of our country.
So we will never see the Queen's Royal Standard again?
I mean, there will be a Royal Standard in Scotland draped over her coffin. So when the staff at Balmoral pay their respects to the Queen, the coffin will be placed in the ballroom. Her coffin will be draped in the Royal Standard in Scotland, but it will never fly from a flagpole again.
Extraordinary, isn't it? The Lord Speaker of the House of Lords, Lord McFall, has said following the death of the Queen, the nation and the whole Commonwealth is united in deep mourning. He says, on behalf of the House of Lords, I extend our thoughts and prayers, first and foremost, to His Majesty the King and the other members of her family. Her Majesty's supreme dedication to public service is unparalleled, and her legacy will be eternal. Today, he says, the nation should reflect on the service she gave to the Crown and to her people and give thanks. And that's the statement from the Lord Speaker of the House of Lords there. And I think that sums up, doesn't it, very, very well, I think, what many will be thinking.
I think, many people will be thinking exactly that, and we wait for the Prime Minister to express her thoughts, her condolences on behalf of the nation. A huge job for the new Prime Minister in order to get the tone right and pay the right kind of respects to the Queen. And it was always about the future generations. If you're just looking at the balcony pictures there, it's where you can see Prince George himself, a future king, elevated, of course, today to slightly closer to the throne than he was at the start of the day. He actually started in a new school today with his sister and younger brother. And, it was always about the king and her future heirs. And we're talking about the longevity of the Queen, President and there where we are, President Kennedy, President Reagan, famously when they went riding horses at Windsor. I mean, there were so many presidents that the Queen met as well. I think she met 14 of the 15 US
presidents. Gorbachev there, of course, just died himself.
Yep.
She was living history, wasn't she, during her 96 years,
Yeah, absolutely. And from 1952 to this year, there we are with Nelson Mandela. I mean, just, a queen on the world stage, someone keen to affect change. Yes, she had no political power, but her very presence, her convening power, was to bring people together, to invite Nelson Mandela, for example, here to go travelling in the Eastern Bloc after the fall of the Berlin Wall. All of these things the Queen did, inviting American presidents to Buckingham Palace. Even presidents who are slightly more controversial, like Donald Trump or leaders of other countries. She knew the power she had by just getting those
those leaders together?
Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has just tweeted. He says it's with the heaviest of hearts that we learned the passing of Canada's longest reigning sovereign, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She was a constant presence in our lives, and her service to Canadians will forever remain an important part of our country's history. And he famously said that he remembered her when he was a baby.
Exactly, Mary. And I'm just interrupting you because we just had a statement from His Majesty the Queen. I should read it to you. It's literally just been issued by Buckingham Palace. So it's from His Majesty the King. It reads this: "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family." He goes on, "We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms and the Commonwealth by countless people around the world." And the King concludes, "During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held." And it's dated Thursday, the 8th of September, 2022. A statement from His Majesty the Queen, a statement from His Majesty the King. You can see that even those of us who have followed this for a long time can still make those mistakes. His Majesty the Queen.
The King.
His Majesty the King has just issued that statement on behalf of Buckingham Palace.
Yes, it is
as difficult as it might be to roll off the tongue.
we will get used to it, won't we, I guess. But he has been preparing for this job his entire life, hasn't he?
He has, and, you know, I think a lot of people say that he will be a better king for the preparations that he's made throughout his time as the heir to the throne and officially the Prince of Wales after he was invested with that title in 1969. The pictures you just saw there was the king supporting the Queen at the G7 summit not that long ago. But and here is the person we used to know as the Prince of Wales, and now His Majesty the King with the Queen consort in the House of Lords in the state opening of Parliament in May.
More world leaders are issuing revealing their sadness. Volodymyr Zelensky from Ukraine says it's with deep sadness that we learned the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. On behalf of the people, we extend sincere condolences. And Michelle O'Neill, Sinn Féin Vice President, Northern Ireland, of course, said she'd learned of the death of the Queen with deep regret. And the Queen, of course, famously went to build bridges in Northern Ireland and wore green and put a hand of friendship
with Martin McGuinness, exactly. And you know, the fact we have a statement from Sinn Féin just, you know, I think articulates the respect with which the Queen was held right across the political spectrum and right across the world.
Yes, it is remarkable, and we are expecting any moment a statement from Liz Truss. And you can see the lectern, the famous lectern out there. It's been dodging the rain showers for the last few days. And here she comes, the Prime Minister.
We are all devastated by the news that we have just heard from Balmoral. The death of Her Majesty the Queen is a huge shock to the nation and to the world. Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her. She ascended the throne just after the Second World War. She championed the development of the Commonwealth from a small group of 7 countries to a family of 56 nations, spanning every continent of the world. We are now a modern, thriving, dynamic nation. Through thick and thin, Queen Elizabeth II provided us with the stability and the strength that we needed. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. Her life of service stretched beyond most of our living memories. In return, she was loved and admired by the people in the United Kingdom and all around the world. She has been a personal inspiration to me and to many Britons. Her devotion to duty is an example to us all. Earlier this week, at 96, she remained determined to carry out her duties as she appointed me as her 15th Prime Minister. Throughout her life, she's visited more than 100 countries, and she has touched the lives of millions around the world. In the difficult days ahead, we will come together with our friends across the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth and the world to celebrate her extraordinary lifetime of service. It is a day of great loss, but Queen Elizabeth II leaves a great legacy. Today, the crown passes, as it has done for more than 1,000 years, to our new monarch, our new head of state, His Majesty, King Charles III. With the King's family, we mourn the loss of his mother, and as we mourn, we must come together as a people to support him, to help him bear the awesome responsibility that he now carries for us all. We offer him our loyalty and devotion, just as his mother devoted so much to so many for so long. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
The Prime Minister of just 2 days standing, Liz Truss, with her statement and ending with the words, "God save the King," Chris, and announcing that he will indeed be called King Charles III.
Yes, that, I should point out, Mary, is the first confirmation we've had that that is the name and the title under which King Charles will rule, King Charles III. And as the Prime Minister herself said at the end there, God save the King. It's a reminder of the profound changes that are now taking place in the country. We do expect, we can now call him this, King Charles III, to visit all 4 nations of the United Kingdom in due course. We've had that statement from him this evening. We are expecting a televised address from him in the coming 24 hours. But you just saw it from the Prime Minister there. What an enormous job she's just been handed. What a difficult speech that was to articulate when she has only been in that position for 2 days. I think we talk again about what happened on Tuesday, the Queen doing that final duty of accepting the resignation of one Prime Minister and inviting the next one to form a new government. Who knew on Tuesday that on Thursday afternoon we would have a statement from Buckingham Palace that the Queen had passed away at Balmoral and we now have King Charles III as our monarch?
And that speech by Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, some phrases that stand out. You know, she talks of the shock to the nation. It describes the Queen as the rock of this country and talks of her dignity and grace that she showed over those 70 years.
And I think that will be reflected not just here, not just in the Commonwealth, but in countries which actively got rid of the monarchy. For example, the United States. We will expect an announcement in due course from President Biden. He was talking this afternoon about his thoughts being with the Queen. And you're right, it's that moment when the whole country will have to take a very deep breath. And these are and were difficult times even before this announcement this afternoon, with the onset of winter and the financial difficulties that are ahead because of the energy crisis. There was a big statement in the House of Commons this afternoon designed to alleviate the pain that was to come for many people. Now people have to acknowledge the fact that this head of state, this monarch, this queen that they've known for 70 years is no longer with us and no longer our head of state.
I think, I wonder whether it will come as a real profound shock to people, because she has been such a constant, as you say. We have almost forgotten to notice, haven't we? We've never known life without her. We have always we've always assumed that she would be there in times of crisis. And I think this country is facing, as you said, particularly challenging times to come. And we will not have that constant with us. There is a big challenge for the new king, isn't there? To step in and not replace her, because he wouldn't seek to do that and it would be impossible anyway, but to find a way through, I'm guessing.
It is kind of like a dual path now. It is at one moment mourning the death of a beloved queen who this country has known nothing else, whilst navigating the path of a new king. And he himself, as we pointed out a short while ago, is having to deal with his own grief at the loss of his beloved mother. Now, look, there's Windsor Castle, the King Henry VIII gate at Windsor Castle. People have already started gathering. And you often wonder, why do people gather at events like this? Why do they choose to go to Windsor Castle? The Queen is not even in residence there and was not even in residence there. But I think this is people want to go somewhere where they can collect their thoughts, where they can take in this news, process this news. This is an international news story. This is a significant change for this country, the death of a monarch of 70 years, a queen who's reigned longer than any other monarch who came before.
No matter how much the Prince of Wales, as he was, Prince Charles, has spent his life preparing for this, I wonder how much of a shock it is to him, as it is to all of us. He's lost both of his parents within 18 months of each other. And no matter how old you are, and anyone who's lost their parents will tell you, no matter how old you are, you still feel like the world has shifted on its axis a little bit, and you are an orphan, no matter what age you are.
You're right. In the space of 18 months, our new king has lost both his father and his mother. And I mean, that is a terrible set of circumstances for anybody, let alone when your father was the consort to the Queen and your mother was the Queen. That is a huge task he now has on his hands to lead the nation in mourning. This nation will mourn, over the coming days until we are expecting details tomorrow, I hear, of the final plans of what happens to the Queen, what happens to her coffin, when there will be a lying in state, when there will be a state funeral. These are all things that have been planned for a long time, none of which will be confirmed until the King himself has signed them off. But that is, a number of days to come in which this country will have to process the news of the death of the Queen, at the same time as having a brand new government, at the same time as having an energy crisis coming down the track. So we are talking about a very significant set of circumstances for the country to deal with at a very difficult time.
Yes, and we're looking at the pictures of the royal balcony, the Buckingham Palace balcony, the Trooping the Colour.
Yes.
Just this year.
Just this year. I remember very well being on the Mall and standing next to the Queen Victoria Memorial, which is right in front of Buckingham Palace. At this very point, the point that the Queen came out to greet the crowds, she is standing there with her cousin. She later came out with other members of the family. And they were the two events that she was able to make for her Platinum Jubilee. She made Trooping the Colour on the Thursday. She made a balcony appearance on the Sunday, and I remember the kind of the ripple from the crowd as the Queen came out on the balcony. That was why they were all there. They were there for the party and for the celebration, but they were really there to see her. And you don't get a good picture like that when you're standing in the Mall. You see a very, very small figure quite a long way away. But the ripple of applause and cheers that came through the crowd at the moment she came out on the balcony there, but for Trooping the Colour on the Thursday and after the pageant on the Sunday, it was something I would never forget, and I'm sure everyone on the Mall will not forget either.
And I think a lot of us watching at work or at home, when we saw her on the balcony at that final part of the Jubilee celebrations, and I wonder if we've got the picture of her in the emerald green. She was standing with Charles, now King Charles, William, and with George. And I wondered, as I wonder whether lots of other people did, whether that would be the last time we saw her on that balcony.
I think we all wondered that, but I say again, how this process of transition has been underway for some time. I remember a couple of Christmases ago, there was a picture of the Queen for some charity event making a Christmas pudding. Next to her, she had King Charles, she had King Charles as he is now, Prince William and Prince George. It was, at that time, the Queen and 3 future kings, all about projecting the future of this institution, which has, as the Queen herself said in a Christmas speech, has had some bumpy times in recent years. And as you rightly say, that happened again on the balcony at the Jubilee. It was a very small number of family, the famously slimmed down member of the family, which was the Queen, Prince Charles, Prince William, and then Prince George and his siblings. And people will not forget the pictures of Prince Louis having fun at the Jubilee on that day as well.
Yes, all right. Chris, thank you. Well, let's go to Downing Street, and our political editor, Robert Peston, is there. Robert, we saw the famous lectern again, very different circumstances, and the brand new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, speaking on behalf of the nation there.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a very sombre mood here in Downing Street. As you just saw, we saw a shaken, I thought, pale Prime Minister Liz Truss. I mean, what an extraordinary start to her term in office. Only 2 days ago, she was in Balmoral, where the Queen, Her Majesty, then confirmed her as the new Prime Minister, having accepted the resignation of Boris Johnson. And today she has made a powerful, moving statement about, she called her the rock, Her Majesty, who helped, she said, to make Britain great. And we should all reflect on the fact that, you know, since in the 70 years of her reign, Britain has enjoyed pretty much unprecedented peace and growing prosperity. But of course, we face very hard times now, a very severe economic shock, a recession almost certainly started, savaging living standards because of this cost of living crisis. And so this bleak news, I think, will shake people up and down the country. The other thing I was struck by, of course, is the way that Liz Truss, in a sense, made clear that very special link between the head of government, that's the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, and the head of state, the monarch, because she revealed, as I think you pointed out, the title that the new king will have, King Charles III. We didn't know that until Liz Truss told us that. It is a very important and special relationship. Liz Truss now with King Charles III will, when the period of mourning is over, see King Charles III once a week in the traditional way, where the Prime Minister will inform the monarch of her important plans and policies and take advice from the king in just the way that 15 Prime Ministers, I mean, this is utterly without precedent in British history, took advice from Queen Elizabeth. This is a genuinely momentous day for the UK because, as head of state, she underpins our parliamentary democracy. And the way that she has fulfilled that function with enormous style and competence, has been shown literally just in the last few weeks when we saw the peaceful transfer of power from Boris Johnson to Liz Truss.
All right, Robert. We've just had a statement from Boris Johnson, of course, her 14th Prime Minister. And he says this is our country's saddest day, and he talks of a deep and personal sense of loss, far more intense perhaps than we expected, about the bright and shining light that has finally gone out. And he said we had come to believe, like children, that she would just go on and on. Very sad. Well, let's go straight to Buckingham Palace, and Nina Hussain is there for us. Nina, what's happening?
Well, Mary, let me take you back to that moment when the Queen's death was actually announced, and it was actually, and perhaps unexpectedly, quite a shocking and emotional moment when the Union flag behind me started to be lowered. The traffic continued, but the crowd stood in silence, and as you have already noted, some of them then broke into song singing the national anthem, a country this moment surely will never forget. Watching it with me is the author and journalist Catherine Mayer, who has written extensively about the royal family in her career. Catherine, goodness, let's just take a deep breath.
Yes.
This is a moment we have not experienced before. We don't yet know how to respond to it.
I think this is much more profound of a moment than most people will realise yet. There are very few of us who've thought about it, and even for those who've actually been thinking about it, anticipating it, it still comes as a shock. Because the Queen, she wasn't just the most famous woman in the world. She was there for most of us for all of our lives, and she was there as a kind of background texture as well. You know, she was, she's in our subconscious in ways we haven't even thought about. You know, so there's all the kind of meaning of what her position was, but there's something deeper than that. There's something just about her always having been there, and for a lot of that time apparently unchanging. You know, so she also gave us a sense almost of her own immortality. So this is, I think, going to be more surprising to people and mean more to people and upset people more than they possibly even thought.
Yeah, we're going through a period of great change, great churn. The Prime Minister, Liz Truss, the new Prime Minister, has just talked about her being the rock. We don't really know how to cope with what might happen next, a potential collective sense of grief.
Yes, I think, I mean, I've been, as we watch the crowds assemble here and the very strange silence of the crowds, so although you have the traffic noise, and you can hear people around us, but that's actually journalists, not the crowd. The crowd itself is silent, and the only time I've seen that before, I actually was here very early morning after Princess Diana died, and there was that same sense of a kind of, it's not yet grief, it's shock. It's people actually beginning to process what's happened, and that need to come and gather here, which also shows that.
Yeah, which we are seeing right now. Catherine, for now, thank you very much. Mary.
All right, Nina Hussain at Buckingham Palace for the time being. Thank you. So let's get a reminder of the statements that we've had in the past hour. First, this from the royal household. The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. And that was a statement from Buckingham Palace this afternoon. And that was followed by one from the new King, King Charles III, as we know he will now be. The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and the deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held. And Chris, that was the statement from her son, the new King Charles III.
Yes, we heard the Prime Minister refer to the King as that. We've since sought some clarification from the King's office, and they have also confirmed that he will reign as King Charles III. People might ask, why are we talking about that? Well, of course, the Queen's father wasn't called George. He reigned as King George VI, but he was his actual name was Bertie. So it was not ever certain until we had confirmation that the former Prince of Wales would rule as King Charles III, and that has now been confirmed by the King's office.
We've had some more statements. This from the former Prime Minister John.
Breaking news, the death of the Queen. Elizabeth II has died. Her Majesty passed away at Balmoral Castle at the age of 96, her family rushing to be by her side.
In a way, I didn't have an apprenticeship. My father died much too young. It was all a very sudden kind of taking on. It's a question of maturing into something that one's got used to doing and accepting the fact that here you are and it's your fate. It is a job for life.
The monarch mourned. No other British ruler has served as long, her passing bringing to a close the end of the second Elizabethan age, the Queen of Australia. The first monarch to visit our shores. From 1954, 16 tours, 16 prime ministers, beloved by millions. Grieving their loss, the royal family mourns their mother, grandmother, great-grandmother.
You can take it from me that the Queen has the quality of tolerance and abundance.
Sharing their heartache and sadness, her marriage to Prince Philip, the longest in royal history.
He is someone who doesn't take easily to compliments, but he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years.
A love story transcending time and turmoil, decades of dedication.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
Long to reign over us.
Most people have a job and then they go home. And in this existence, the job and the life go on together because you can't really divide it up.
Remembered and revered, our strength and stay for generations.
If you live in this sort of life, you live very much by tradition and by continuity.
Queen Elizabeth II, etched in our history, forever in our hearts.
We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
Hello Australia, you are waking up to the sad news that the Queen has died. It's the day we knew was inevitable but had hoped would never come. Queen Elizabeth II passed away aged 96 after 70 years on the throne.
Her death was confirmed by the royal household with an official announcement from Buckingham Palace. The statement said the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon, UK time. The King Charles and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral overnight and will return to London tomorrow. It ends an extraordinary reign, one that will most likely never be seen again.
The Queen had been suffering from mobility problems since the end of last year, but her health deteriorated in the last few days. She was last seen on Wednesday, our time, when she greeted the new UK Prime Minister, Liz Truss. The event took place at Balmoral, not at Buckingham Palace.
In the lead up to the Queen's passing, doctors had placed her under medical supervision. The royal family members rushed to her side in Scotland. All her children were there: Charles, Anne, Andrew and Edward, along with Prince William. Prince Harry had also planned to be there.
Let's go live to our Europe Bureau Chief Hugh Whitfield outside Balmoral Castle. Hugh, the royal family has gathered together. What a sad day for the family.
Koshi, Nat, good morning. It is a sad day for this royal family, sad day for millions of people right around the world. But the important thing, I think, to remember as the world mourns the Queen's death is that this has been an intensely private family day for the royal family. Charles, King Charles, as he is now, and Camilla, the Queen Consort, were nearby to hear this morning when the news came through that the Queen's health had caused doctors to become concerned. The family quickly rallied round throughout the course of the day. Princess Anne, who was also here in Scotland, coming here to Balmoral, and then late this afternoon, around 5 p.m. local time here, just 2 hours ago or so, Prince William, along with Prince Andrew, Edward, Sophie and, we believe, Prince Harry, all making it here to Balmoral. Before that announcement was made by Buckingham Palace that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II had passed away. It ends a remarkable, record-breaking 70-year reign. Frail, in front of a fire at her treasured holiday home in Balmoral, Scotland, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, aged 96, standing to duty to meet the new UK Prime Minister, the 15th in her reign. We now know just how unwell she was, but her nation, the Commonwealth, always came first for the longest-serving British monarch. She celebrated 70 years on the throne, her Platinum Jubilee. While her lost mobility meant she didn't take to the streets or Horse Guards parade, she was on the balcony, her great-grandchildren by her side, for a wave to the people for her last milestone hurrah. For the princess, who never expected to become queen. Born in London's Mayfair in 1926, Princess Elizabeth was the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York. Educated by a governess at home, Lilibet, as she was known to her loved ones, lived a privileged and carefree childhood. But young Elizabeth's life and legacy were to change almost overnight when her uncle, King Edward VIII, abdicated to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee.
This decision has been made less difficult to me by the sure knowledge that my brother will be able to take my place forthwith.
Edward's divisive decision turned his brother's world on its head.
Everything changed for the Queen from the moment that her uncle Edward abdicated. It changed everything. It changed her future life. It changed her father's life. A lot of people say it shortened her father's life as well.
The coronation of the new King George took place in 1937, and from that day on, Elizabeth became a queen in training.
I remember my father making me write down what I remembered about his coronation. It was very valuable.
Just 2 years later, a young naval officer was tasked with entertaining Elizabeth and her sister at a military event. It was then, as legend goes, that the 13-year-old princess fell for Philip over a game of croquet. In 1939, Britain went to war. A teenage Elizabeth and her younger sister Margaret were moved to the safety of Windsor Castle, while her parents remained at Buckingham Palace. Aged 14, Elizabeth, the heir, made her first public speech addressing thousands of evacuated children on BBC Radio, the first of many public orations.
Her Royal Highness
Princess Elizabeth.
I want, on behalf of all the children at home, to send you our love and best wishes to you and to your kind hosts as well.
By 1944, aged 18, Elizabeth had joined the women's branch of the Territorial Army and began her training as a mechanic soon after. Her new role earned her the nickname Princess Auto Mechanic in the British press. When the war eventually ended, Elizabeth and Margaret slipped into the crowds unnoticed to join the celebrations, an anecdote that was turned into a blockbuster film many years later.
We're going out incognito on the most extraordinary night of my life.
2 years after victory brought peace to Britain's shores, Elizabeth celebrated her 21st birthday. In another national address, she pledged to dedicate her life to the service of the Commonwealth.
My whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
Her coming of age complete when Elizabeth accepted the hand of an exiled Greek and Danish prince, the handsome sailor proposing more than a decade after the pair first met.
Soon, the nation rejoiced at the announcement of Princess Elizabeth's engagement.
I think a lot of people find it hard to believe that she never had another love. He was the man for her.
Philip renounced his right to both European thrones in order to wed, and the Commonwealth celebrated the marriage of Princess Elizabeth. In challenging economic times, the wedding could not be seen as extravagant. Even the heir to the throne exchanged ration coupons for material for her wedding dress.
Before long, the calls of the people were answered as onto the famous balcony came the bride and bridegroom.
After marrying, the young couple moved to Malta, where Prince Philip was stationed with the Navy.
At the Villa Guadjamanja, the princess joined the Duke.
2 blissful years of relative normality. Elizabeth described them as among the happiest of her life. Beaches and boat trips, dinners and dances.
The guests of honour, the Princess and the Duke.
Soon their family grew. Prince Charles, born in 1948, and Princess Anne in 1950. The Queen was abroad when news reached her of her father's sudden death from lung cancer.
The tragic news reached Princess Elizabeth and her husband while in Kenya.
The grief and gravity of that moment reimagined in the series The Crown.
This new Elizabethan age comes at a time when mankind stands uncertainly poised.
Wait.
On the edge of catastrophe.
The 27-year-old began her transition from mother to monarch.
Is Your Majesty willing to take the oath?
I am willing.
Her coronation was watched by 20 million people around the world, the biggest television event of the time. Just months later, the new Queen became the first and only reigning monarch to visit Australia.
Riding at anchor, royal as a swan, is the Queen we have never seen.
Welcomed by around 1 million onlookers as she sailed into Sydney Harbour on the royal barge.
I want to tell you all how happy I am to be amongst you and how much I look forward to my journey through Australia.
The Queen and Philip traversed the country from Townsville to Tasmania, 57 towns and cities in 58 days. Her Majesty would return to Australia a further 15 times, building a close bond with a far-off nation. A decade after the birth of Princess Anne, Prince Andrew arrived, and 4 years later, Prince Edward.
Well, I think the Queen herself would have admitted that, she was a very different mother to her first 2 children and her later 2 children. She had more confidence and more time when she was dealing with Andrew and Edward.
A house full of Windsors, 4 children, and of course, the family's 4-legged friends. The Queen was a lifelong devotee to her dogs. Her first corgi, Dookie, a gift from her father when she was a child. It's estimated she owned over 30 dogs in her lifetime, a lifelong passion for horses too. when a young man fired blanks at the royals during the annual Trooping of the Colour Parade, Her Majesty's mastery in the saddle was unmistakable.
Duke of Edinburgh, Colonel of the Grenadier Guards. Hello, some little disturbance. Burmese receiving a reassuring pat from Her Majesty the Queen.
And she's a marvellous rider, so got a marvellous way with horses. Made of strong stuff, you know.
That stern poker face only occasionally slipped while watching her own horses crossing the finish line first.
Her Majesty the Queen only presents 2 trophies during Royal Ascot, and look at the delight there, the sheer joy.
1992 was not so joyful. The royals were rocked by a terrible 12 months.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure.
Newspaper scandals and the shock divorce proceedings of 3 of her children caused great public embarrassment for Her Majesty. A devastating fire at Windsor Castle destroyed more than 100 rooms.
In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
Her popularity dipped further as the world mourned Princess Diana in 1997.
She was an exceptional and gifted human being. In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness.
It is a time in the 1990s when most people will acknowledge that the Queen did put a foot wrong, and she did suffer. I think the royal family collectively suffered a public image crisis, and it took a number of years for that to mend.
But with her stoic sensibility, Queen Elizabeth weathered the storm.
Today is another landmark.
Year upon year, the Queen's traditional Christmas Day message summarised the heartaches and the happenings of the past 12 months.
I hope that 1958 may bring you God's blessing
and hopes for the coming year.
Christmas will bring back sad memories. It is true that the world has had to confront moments of darkness this year.
Christmas at Sandringham would have been a full house in recent years, with 8 grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren. In recent times, Queen Elizabeth handed over extra responsibilities to the younger generations, who in turn brought some fun to the firm.
Remember when you told us to bring it at the Invictus Games?
Careful what you wish for. Boom.
Oh, really? Please.
Boom.
But she knew how to have her own fun too, a rare cameo appearance livening up the 2012 Olympic opening ceremony.
Good evening, Swan.
After her husband retired, Her Majesty still refused to hang up her hat. Front and centre stage was where Queen Elizabeth II spent much of her life. Here in June 2021, surrounded by world leaders at the G7 summit.
Are you supposed to be looking as if you're enjoying it?
Yes.
Her wit and wisdom as sharp as ever at the age of 95. A lifetime dedicated to service. Elizabeth had links to more than 600 charities and organisations. She visited more than 100 countries during her reign and was served by more than 170 Prime Ministers across the Commonwealth, including 15 British Prime Ministers and 16 Australian.
Well, I think the Queen's record can be summed up with that one word, and that word is duty. She has always put her duty as the Queen ahead of every other consideration.
Even the pandemic didn't halt public engagements.
She leapt on video calling. She knew that this would be another way to be seen, to be believed, which was one of her mantras throughout her whole reign.
And in the darkness of Britain's lockdowns, she became the guiding voice of a nation.
We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
Urging Britons to stay strong through the restrictions. Her own lockdown tragedy came when her beloved husband Philip passed away at the age of 99. COVID restrictions meant the funeral was a moving, yet muted affair. In the months that followed,
I'm here.
business as usual, but showing her age. A cane appearing in public, a trip cancelled on doctor's orders, and a rare overnight hospital stay, forcing Her Majesty to slow down and signalling a monarch nearing the end of her reign. For almost 7 decades, she bore the weight of the crown. Now, Queen Elizabeth's reign draws to a close, but a remarkable royal legacy will live on.
The Queen passed away here at Balmoral Castle just a couple of hours ago, peacefully, we are told, by Buckingham Palace. Now, in the next couple of hours, over the next couple of days, there is all sorts of protocol that will take place, long planned for. The Queen involved in much of that planning as well. The fact that the Queen has passed away here at Balmoral means that there'll be activities here in Scotland, but her body is expected to remain here for at least 24 to 36 hours. Her coffin will be moved into the ballroom here at Balmoral Castle, draped in the royal standard. It will give members of her family, many of whom who have gathered here throughout the course of the day, and members of the royal household, including the staff who have worked, many of them for many years here at Balmoral. It'll give all of them a chance to pay their respects. Chief among them will be the King, who has released a statement. It reads, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held." That is a statement from King Charles III, who became king the moment that the Queen passed away, and a short time ago it was confirmed that he will be known as King Charles III. A new sovereign, a new king or queen can choose a different name if they want to, just as Elizabeth's father, King George VI, did. He was born Albert but chose King George as a name as sovereign. So King Charles III is now the king.
Yeah, it is an extraordinary moment in time, isn't it, Hugh? The new Prime Minister of the UK has spoken.
Yeah, Nat, and keep in mind here that Liz Truss has been in this job for just 2 days. In fact, the new Prime Minister was one of the last people